A chieftain of the NNPP and allied to Rabiu Kwakwaso, Buba Galadima, has alleged that the former president Muhammad Buhari did not support Bola Ahmed Tinubu's presidential ambition. Galadima also accused him of orchestrating a silent sabotage within the party's internal framework. And to have this conversation about Buhari didn't want Tinubu to become president, Baba Galadima's speech, we have our guest Pat Obiene, civil rights activist, to talk to us and give us his own points of view on this particular topic. Good evening, Pat.
Thank you. Good evening, and good evening to Nigeria.
Yo, good evening. Oh, how would you describe the relationship between Buhari and Tinubu leading up to the 2023 elections? Also, were there signs of discord or collaboration?
Well, I think it's very obvious to many Nigerians. Don't forget, former President Buhari is known to be a very conservative person. Part of what appealed to Nigerians that probably supported his quest. I haven't tried close to 4 times to be a civilian president, regardless his military days. Was that Nigerians perceive him to be one who believe in the fight against corruption. Even some of us were old enough to know that even under his military time, he did a whole lot of the field work. But by way of character, he was perceived to be one who tried to be upright and wouldn't tolerate abuse of power or probably indiscipline. But all that has changed since ever he plunged into the democratic dispensation. And remember, having failed 3 times as ANPP to CPC, probably between the 2014-2015 elections, they realized that there was need to have a mega arrangement to be able to defeat the PDP. And in that arrangement, it was clear that his CPC had a greater portion of the collection of parties that came together, including the ACN, of which current President Bola Tinubu held a very strong stake. But when you look in terms of character, they tend not to be a people who share the same kind of political philosophy when it comes to public office. So from that point, probably former President Buhari perceived Tinubu to be somebody very ambitious. And probably he wasn't very comfortable with that. And regardless that former President Buhari brought in, the CPC was responsible for a greater support of that victory. He suspected Tinubu to wanting to dictate, probably want to always have his way. And he wasn't really comfortable with that. Hence, that's why you find even when now build up the 2020 election, Tinubu is now the hashtag known for saying a Miloko my turn. Probably explains if that was part of the undercurrent arrangement when Buhari had his way.
Okay, Pat.
So there has been that strange relationship all along, even why when President Buhari had some deficiencies, you notice Nigerians started having growing weary of Buhari leadership, and people were asking that if the likes of Tinubu as a national leader of the party, how come he wasn't influential to shaping Buhari's schemes and programs to appeal more to Nigerians? But clearly, I'm sure it was traced to that very strange relationship they've had before now.
Pat, concerning the unbearable cost of living, the growing insecurity, the total, leadership disconnect, would you say that Buhari saw the cracks before the house collapsed?
No, that's what I'm saying. Because of the character problem, ordinarily it also underscored when we argue that the Nigerian political parties don't have an ideology. These sufferings, those items you mentioned now, if it was a party built on the ideology of the suffering of the Nigerian people, in other words, the ideology of the APC was actually supposed to be a reflection of the aspiration, yearnings of Nigeria, right? Or Nigerians. But because it was actually driven, first of all, that Buhari wanted to attain power, democratic power. That's just the driving force. That was why everything was built around him. It wasn't necessarily because they had a practical understanding and practical solution of solving the Nigeria and Nigerians' problem, particularly the items you outlined or referred to. That wasn't the case. That's still a carryover of what's happening to the Tinubu's government. It was just an individualistic ambition that, probably like in Buhari's case, he just wanted it to be on record that a time came, once upon a time, having served military head of state, he was also a civilian president, like his counterpart, Chief Olusegun Obasanjo. It's that same mentality that President Tinubu had carried on. Why it appears they just can't come up with practical solutions to resolve the hard times, the biting economic hardship. So that's how you know, and it confirms that truly, since our 25 years of democratic experience, the major parties like the Tria now, the PDP and the APC, are not really built on, the foundation is not really built on ideology. And like they will be quick to the end and I will tell you that, oh, Nigeria is built on interest. Like I had another conversation earlier today, somewhere in Sister Station. And I argued, I said, look, this thing you say is on interest. Now go and check in other succeeding consumer democracies. That interest is defined along the line of either rule of law, accountability, policies on education, policies on health, policies on food security. So when you hear the other Western presidents, they tell you it's interest. That interest the individual member of that party is struggling for is to ensure that, for example, it could be the interest to see that the rule of law prevails, to see that the respect for human rights prevails, to see that accountability in public office prevails, to see that transparency prevails, to see that discipline prevails in public office. That's the interest. Why that member of that party will be struggling against all other forces within the party or against an opposition party. But in Nigeria here, that's the idea of the interest in the party is misconstrued. The idea is that it is the president with the ability probably to divide the public treasury and in turn use our common patrimony to divide the electorate, starting from members of the party. Why you don't even see internal democracy thriving? Where, like you can see the embarrassing statement by a PDP forward days ago from Bayelsa, how one man sponsored a party, he was betrayed. Therefore, somebody else should show up and sponsor the party. Does that not defeat, even under our electoral laws in Nigeria? Political parties should not be seen to be sponsored by one man, or that it is the interest, the feeling of one man that prevails over the party. That is the problem. So when you hear quarrels, you now find something like, somebody didn't want one person to be president. That is an aberration. It defeats the whole essence of an ideology of a political party. It should be a collective responsibility. It should be a collective interest. It should be a shared value system of members of the party. So I think that this reveals why Nigerians as a people, we need to work a whole lot more harder. We need to be more, sacrificial. We need to really show more commitment. More people need to be interested in the political development of Nigeria, because clearly it shows that we've not had the kind of leaders who actually, have a grasp, a practical understanding of what an ideology of a political party must be, which actually should be an embodiment, captures the aspiration and yearning of people, particularly when you take into account the prevailing socio-economic conditions of the people at the time. Your party ideology cannot be divorced. You cannot, separate the party ideology from the prevailing economic, socio-economic situation of the people at a particular time. So any party that does that and continues to promote an individual, clearly it's just a tactical way of drifting to tyranny and dictatorship. And that is not healthy for a developing democracy as Nigeria. And that's the problem. It's a fundamental problem. So that's why you find it difficult that government after government, you find it difficult. Otherwise, before the next election, debate should be surrounded around having policy debates on socio-economic issues. That, like we are not even the opposition. There should be something I call a freedom charter because it appears we are back to neo-colonialism. There is no economic freedom. There is no social freedom. Look at the reign of impunity, abuse of power. There is no rule of law. Right now, individuals are bigger than the law courts. These are things that parties should come together and take the way forward and take an ideology to the extent that if they are doing power and fail to demonstrate respect for these values, then part of the ideology should be that individuals who betray that shared value or shared ideology should resign from their public offices as a matter of discipline. Like we can see in South Africa. Look at Zuma. The ANC dealt with him to the extent we saw his prison uniform. It's an ideology. Because that's what the party was known for, struggling for over 87 years till 1990 when Mandela set out on the prison gate. Immediately Zuma spread from those values, we saw what happened to him, a serving president. So that's exactly how you know that the party, the political party is actually deep-rooted on an ideology that is shared by every member of that party. We've not had that in Nigeria. That's why you could see when individuals keep popping up to the extent of being the money bag of the party. And there's even a crime. Because when parties conduct their primaries and want to throw up candidates, INEC was supposed to go and trace the source of funding. And if it is not shown evidently enough that the monies you are getting collectively, probably somebody got it from the public treasury, he was supposed to answer for it. We don't have such records. So that is why such impunity has carried on, and most of the parties continue to build their programs and policies and around an individual. And that is not healthy for the next generation. It shows that all the 25 years we've been trying to experiment this democracy is actually like one step forward and 10 steps backward, if you ask me.
So would you describe the relationship between... Can you hear me?
Yes, please. Go on.
Okay, so if this claim holds any weight in particular, what long-term consequences would this have on the political landscape of Nigeria? I mean, apart from the whole electoral cycle that is going on.
Now, what is most important, the impact is that it's not going to create a healthy competition. It's going to suppress popular participation because actually if you look at the secret factors why other constitutional democracy is working and succeeding and enjoying considerable social stability is because the majority of the people actually promote the value of rule of law, which is core, which is at the center of any society called a democratic society. And like I said last time in our previous interview, I said, rule of law is not only seen when it manifests from the law court. It is actually seen what happens day to day in our public offices by public officers. For example, an individual in a public executive cannot act as legislature, act as the one who implements the law, and also act as interpreter. Clearly, that's what you are beginning to see. So we need a crop of men and women who will commit greater time. First of all, agree that their driving force is not to see public office as a means of amassing wealth and see the public office as a tool to oppress dissident voices. Any democratic society that will not demonstrate a greater sense of political tolerance, that there must be shades of opinion, particularly if those who are in power don't conduct their affairs in conformity with the written down laws, the law of the land, and that you don't want to tolerate disagreements within your circle, even your circle, and that members of the party have a right to freely choose who represents them, and that those who have fall short, who probably didn't want to conduct themselves in conformity, there are two options. It's either they resign from the offices or they comply to the legal processes to leave the office. Once you don't have people who promote these values, then the impact will continue to create artificial poverty in the face of wastage. Because you now have leaders who are not innovative, no critical thinking. Everybody wakes up, imagine supporting the idea that the national budget should continue to be hinged on one commodity from one section. Is that justice? Is that fairness? And you don't have members of political parties raising this as a fundamental debate on in the floor of the National Assembly. Not to tolerate that. You find the executive that has subsumed the other arm of government, There are no checks and balances. So it's all making mockery. That is one of the negative impacts. It suppresses accountability. It suppresses transparency. And that you're running a money economy, you're running a bogus government side, a situation where you're promoting more of consumption rather than production. And you're swelling, your debt profile is swelling. Now, I was trying to point out when you asked the negative impact. Clearly, it will create artificial poverty. It will undermine the growth of the economy because clearly, students of the Nigerian crisis, we all agree that leadership is at the center of the Nigerian problem. I want to add quickly, not just leadership, the quality of the leadership. Like Nelson Mandela Mahakon will remind us that the quality of change in any society is largely dependent on the quality of leadership exercised. Unquote. Why is this important? Now, if you say you won't give attention to the quality of leadership, we continue to push support people whose driving force, first of all, is that they see it as an investment. They see public office as an investment. Clearly, you would have suppressed franchise because they ain't going to give attention. They won't want to listen to what the people are saying. The whole focus will be how to recoup all that was invested, all the finances that was invested. Now, let me tell you something. Do you know why there is a do or die syndrome and everybody feels that everything was built around one man? You know, they tell you about a popular can somebody if you're popular can contest, right? Now, does it not tell us that these persons or group of persons or individuals who think that they must steal the common patrimony of the public and in turn use it to force themselves, buy over agencies and the umpires, security agencies, just to ensure they retain power? Does it not confirm to the electorates and we, the good people of Nigeria, that these people are not popular? That is what it tells you. And as a people, it is now necessary more than ever before to rise up and deal with that evil. For crying out loud, if you're a popular candidate, you don't need to force us. You don't need to get us to starve us to be loyal, which is one of the Machiavellian tools they deploy, the crop of leaders we are dealing with right now. No innovation, budget after budget, they deliberately don't want to expand the economic space so that the electorates can be comfortable enough to make their free choice independently without incumbrances. They don't want that. And I think that it is high time the electorate, realize this and stand up to that challenge. Being a poor man doesn't mean the absence of money in your hand or even food, no food in your stomach. That doesn't connote the poor person. Poverty is in the mind. In fact, if you go study the Norman conquest, slaves with shackles in their hand rose up and they came together and stood against their slave masters, the freedom, to dismantle the feudal system. Let alone that the semblance of some of us can go about and make a living for ourselves. I wonder that with that kind of even position, we'll be able to come together, and carry out an intellectual ordinary revolution where we need to replace the crop of leaders. First of all, those of us who will believe that we need to discourage the mentality that political parties and values and all the intricacies that will build up the elections must be built around one man. It is not correct. So the negative impact will be that you will be prolonging the doomsday where first of all, when the people's vote don't count, the leadership, the government suffers legitimacy. Legitimacy is one of the problems. Last time I used to argue, this violent crime is here across Nigeria. Go and trace. You will be shocked that it is traced to illegitimacy. A lot of people, by constitutional requirements, every state has three senators. Go and check. Some of these local government states, one senator has close to over 12 LGs. Look at, for example, Kano, 44 local governments with 3 senators. So you can imagine that. One senator in Kano is 3 times bigger than Bayelsa State with 8 LGs. Question: how many times has this senator go to engage members of this senatorial district? He wouldn't. And the people themselves are agitated. They have a lot they want to tell the government. They can't reach the president, but they can reach. They have a senator. You're in a representative system. They need to talk to the senator. They don't talk every day and know that there is a senator, but they don't know how he looks like because he doesn't come to engage them in a town hall meeting where you could have an interface, deliberations, and debates to formulate policies that will directly address them. So that if the president cannot understand their plight, it is the duty of the senator to take their aspirations, their plight, yearnings, to say, look, president, as you're planning this budget, this is what the people have expressed to me. This is what represents the aspiration. Therefore, build it into the budget. That doesn't, we don't have that culture. So how can the economy grow? Like the adage that the dancer doesn't see his back. So for them, even in the military days, at some point they introduced programs we call the Babangida, the things like mass mobilization. You don't find that even under a civilian dispensation, a democracy for that matter. And these are the things, these are the core of the democratic institutions we are talking about. They are not able to participate. So they resort to violence. So since we have a senator, we can't reach the president, we can't reach the governor, we can't reach the senator, what do? They resort to violence. And look at the collateral damage. Look at the impact. Lots of lives, no great people can access the farm. Creating a situation for a few of them just sit down in their comfort, swallowing the common patrimony like python. When actually the commonwealth belongs to all of us. And you think that you can just resort to the NSA and say, oh, she was the rest of the and you deploy troops. Who told you? The greatest, the strongest army in the whole world is the human spirit. The human spirit is the strongest army. And if you think that you cannot address the human spirit, you are joking.
Okay, Pat.
Right? So that is the more reason this time around, the Nigerian people must remember the quantity and the quality of suffering they have suffered. They've gone through these long years, and therefore must realize that it is their responsibility, individual, collective, organizational-wise, professional-wise, to take responsibility and not to continue this trajectory of saying, oh, they come to share 10,000 for us, they say it's my tribesman. Tribesmen, their ethnicity and religion has clearly proven us wrong. Before the nature smiled at the Niger, good luck went there. When at the end of 2015, for whatever reason, the Niger Delta was wanted to say he failed. Personally, I only give it to him that the only success I see there is the passage of the Local Contents Act. Even though all the pipes that were getting buzzed down in the South Niger Delta here. Okay, he left. You know, if it was an issue of ethnicity, the almighty Buhari came, how did he leave us? You know more than I do. Now you have somebody say, oh, Yoruba, he's a Muslim too. Now he's here. You know the tale right now. So all these are more than enough evidence that tribe, religion are no longer yardstick to choose whoever will be the leader of the president of Nigeria, because it cannot guarantee rule of law. It cannot guarantee transparency. It cannot guarantee good governance. It cannot guarantee good leadership. We have had enough evidence. So it is high time Nigerians stand up and live above those primordial sentiments, so that for once they can find the right leader that can, demonstrate, a genuine belief that suffering anywhere is suffering everywhere.
Totally.
Insecurity anywhere is insecurity everywhere.
Okay.
Injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere.
Pat, let's go back to what we're talking about, Pat. Concerning the fact that the 2027 election is, around the corner, this claim by Galadima, do you think that it has like any sort of it has anything to do with political ambitions? And if so, what? If not, rather, what of what use is this conversation that he had during the interview?
I got the focus of our conversation. If you listen to me carefully, that's why I started with reminding you the background, the circumstances that brought about the APC. And that's the focus of the intention and motive of Galadima's revelation. That the CPC accounts for 70% of the APC bloc. And there are insinuations now that they are connected with Buhari to say they are pulling. So Galadima is only pointing to the fact that if that happens eventually, even after this interview, then know that he's only reaffirming that was the intention, that was the calculation, that was the arrangement from the beginning before APC came on board. That is all. That is the if you choose the word ambition. And that right now, since Buhari cannot come back to contest under the Nigerian law, and to confirm that dislike he had for President Tinubu then, like Galadima is trying to make us believe, then, if tomorrow you hear that the APC bloc, which accounts for majority of the conglomeration of the APC, then don't be surprised. It's only an affirmation that yes, all along, Buhari decided to only go along just to get the support to defeat good luck. Mm-hmm. So now that there is no mutual relationship between him and Tinubu, and the circumstances have changed. So now it's perhaps the right time, because he has no personal, he can no longer come to contest. He can choose to sway that majority support that makes up the APC. So whoever that he considers a little more probably considerate and appealing to the Nigerian people, so to speak. This is me playing the devil's advocate now. So that's clearly where Galadima is pointing us to. Not necessarily Buhari has any ambition, but that all the consultations that are going to him right now, they are all attempts to confirm that, as we speak, there are speculations because, the North has earlier accused the President Tinubu government for lopsided appointments and not being fair in the way he's going about political appointments and considerations. That is of public knowledge. The North has been very vocal. They are not really comfortable, independent of even what Buhari thinks. Right? It's in the public domain. So that is all, if you ask me, what Galadima just said this so that nobody will get too surprised if tomorrow you hear that the CPC bloc had pulled out of the APC. That is all Galadima is trying to make us understand.
All right then. So how has this statement impacted public perspective of both Buhari and Tinubu among their supporters and even the general electorate?
Clearly, for me, it's irrelevant. Like if you read the middle of my analysis, Nigerians should live above building the political system around individuals. That is why those are one of the secret factors that has led to others succeeding conscious democracy. We cannot continue to follow the old order. It has not helped matters. It has rather worsened matters. Because it is this kind of primordial political calculations or permutations that has kept us in this suffering. Because by so doing, we have shut out the actual leaders that would have occupied the space. And following that, because it is this character, let everything be built around him. So it's a fundamental mistake. So I would discourage that while these other ones have made these mistakes, and this is where they left us, the young generations and those who desire a better Nigeria cannot continue in that trajectory. We need to, create entirely a more serious democratic Nigeria for ourselves and the next generation. Because it is evident enough that this trajectory, this crop of leaders we are referring to, had displayed before us, has rather worsened situation, created artificial poverty, created so much abuse of power, so much loss of life. Just imagine President Tinubu getting out of this country shortly after the implosion, or the political implosion he created in Rivers State. We had killings in Benue, while we are yet to figure out that there was another round of mass killing in Plateau. Who is that responsible president, responsive president that will lead the country in such circumstance? On the value that you want to go and review your performance. What could be more mark of performance, indicator of performance, other than the current violent crime right under your nose than getting at the town? So uneasy. So is that beneficial to Nigerians? For life, we're talking about lives. I recall sometimes Berlusconi, sometimes Prime Minister of Italy. You recall the early days of the Boko Haram hit. There was this Briton and Italian captured in somewhere in Bauchi. Berlusconi was airborne and got the report that, look, Your Excellency, the Italian and the Briton has been held hostage in Bauchi. Do you know what Berlusconi did? He asked the pilot to turn to reverse the plane back to Rome, just for the life of one Italian. And here we have a president, Tinubu, hours before, he heard it clearly that there is carnage going on in Benue. Just hours later, it continued in Plateau State. He decided to leave the country. So how can that have an impact in the electorate? What impact how can young people follow that kind of value system? That is a devil philosophy. I should be discouraged.
Signature TV, news in your pocket.